Generation Alpha is pretty much Generation AI. They were born with a phone and an iPad in their hand. We can't have the same traditional industrial structures for them in school where our kids are going to get bored and equity gaps are going to grow.
Welcome. I'm excited to talk about leadership today because leadership has changed so much during the pandemic, and I think it's going to change quite a bit as we kind of come out of the pandemic. So in this interview, I have Mike Connor, and Mike Connor is the superintendent in Middletown, Connecticut. And we talk about everything from basketball to innovation to AI to equity, and I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. We geeked out for a little bit, didn't capture all of that, but I think you'll get some really good tips around how to think into the future. See you on the other side. So Michael, thanks for joining me today. We're really excited to have this conversation to talk about just the future of leadership in education. And I think you would agree just the way we thought about leadership, pre-COVID to where we are now kind of at the peak of COVID. And as you look into the future, into post-COVID life, what are some of the things that you've been reflecting on as in your own leadership that you would want to carry into post-COVID? Because there's definitely some agility and thinking that really helped me as I guided our organization. I'm curious what's on your mind around that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Anthony, for having me here. Great pleasure. I think that, we've experienced three stages of education because of the pandemic. Before COVID, right? Post March 13th, a lot of the traditional industrial structures that were used in education during COVID, where there was a lot of experimentation within this new business model or this prototype that we're experimenting with still, and then moving to the post-pandemic. I think that there's a lot of learning that have occurred during COVID stage. More importantly, I think that the learning from the context of looking at our organizationals differently, management theory differently, and how we have to be agile, more on the lines of this R&D approach of lean prototyping within education. That's not a part of our vernacular in education, right? Prototyping and being agile. But these are the things that we have to adopt. And then also, too, I think that when we look at, some of the biggest quandaries we're facing in education, right? The exacerbated achievement gap, learning loss, inequities that we're facing, we have to now start underscoring data and analytics. That's something that has not fundamentally been a part of education, and coupling it with research as well. So organizational theory, management theory, classroom instruction is going to look different. Artificial intelligence going to look different. Now that we have an achievement gap and learning loss, we have to ensure that there's a level of flexibility to meet all students and all learners. So this is, to me, an innovator by nature. This is a great opportunity to really apply some of these conceptual models or these theoretical frameworks and put it in place for high levels of experimentation. But it's going to be an arduous shift, a paradigm shift for, leaders that are fundamentally grounded in some of the traditional practices.
Yeah, that's awesome. There are two things. And I think the first thing I wanted to kind of work into a little bit more is you mentioned lean prototyping, and I'm sure you read like Lean Startup with Eric Ries and know about agile development. But one of the hangups I feel like I've experienced in talking with educators sometimes is do we really want to prototype on our students? This and on education, because we have centuries of how education should exist. And how did you make that shift in your mindset that prototyping is okay?
It's funny that you say that, Anthony, because my whole cabinet, we actually took a design thinking course at MIT. It was about 8 of us, because when I first got here, roughly about 4 years ago, I was an outlier because I was speaking as a design thinker on how to disrupt the system for better outcomes, but they didn't have that prerequisite or that background knowledge. So now when we're in meetings, right, we're able to adopt the pull methods, weekly meetings with visual, having visual management boards and making these changes and identifying the activity sets. It's become more lucid because now we have a common lexicon or approach around design thinking.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And you're living it every day. So that gives you the kind of the practice that, so often people go to trainings and then go back to like the way they did things, just because they're uncomfortable or afraid of doing it wrong, right? But I think, I was talking with a district the other day and they're like, I think they're trying to do some in-classroom and online learning simultaneously in the classroom. And they were, off buying all this stuff. And I think all districts right now are going through let's try some things. But at the same time, some of the things they try are going to be, could be fails, right? Right. We see all the news of Chicago public schools. They want, teachers coming in, and that was kind of a fail just because of the communications and alignment there. Sometimes some of these things are so urgent in school systems. At the same time, you need some time to prototype, like you said, and figure out what the right moves are. How do you decide, like, how do you balance, how to like move forward quickly on something? When to start small, like how does that decision making happen?
Data and analytics, right? And I know it's rhetoric at this time, right, Anthony? So much we talked about. We're really prescriptive on how we use data, right? And it's not just at a artificial or surface level from the context of being descriptive. We are, right? We have those unsupervised analyses with the data and look at it, from a business intelligence standpoint, but we actually get down to critical variables that we want to measure, make predictions based off of the interactions of certain variables using statistical modeling. And, having that constant diagnostic lens as well to make changes within the experiment. I think that right now in COVID is the greatest experimentation, but simultaneously, you want to be able to build capacity on the systems that you want to build out after COVID as well. So we put a huge focus on capacity because when you think about this, right, the incubators of innovators are saying, yes, this is a great opportunity, but you also have to facilitate the time to ensure that you're building critical capacity and capabilities around these new elements within your operating model, i.e. blended and personalized learning. Yeah. And it's like it's asking a teacher that's right-handed, who's been writing with his or her right hand for years, to now write in a proficient manner with your left hand. So we spent a lot of time and still spending a lot of time around building capacity around this environment. It's not just identifying tools, but is identifying strategies to couple the tools. And, we want to ensure that we're building a cadre of pedagogues that's creating this common language of instruction in this environment with the rapid ideation and rapid iteration within the prototype itself.
Do you ever struggle with, you put this kind of system in place and having people maintain the discipline that's necessary to get through the dips of learning, right? As you try to create a learning org, how do you support people in your organization to constantly be learning? Because discipline is having your own grit and discipline through this time is challenging at times.
Yeah, it's first relationships, obviously, but it's okay to fail, right? And in the design thinking world, Anthony, your first prototype is not going to be your best prototype. So that's how that's how we're taking it, right? Your first, your first approach to trying this new strategy or method out within this blended context is not going to be your best, but guess what? You're going to have continuous support, and it's going to be this continuous learning process, and improvement process, within this environment as well. So, we've been really supporting teachers, supporting leaders, focusing on the growth of learning, and also too creating affinity groups within this environment as well, so that teachers are supporting teachers as well, and teachers are learning from teachers and providing the support mechanisms during this environment. We also have to look at the social emotional of our teachers as well, and our leaders and the adults too. So it's not just students in this isolated context, but also the SEL and the mental health of our teachers.
With your incredible background in education leadership, if you had to design a program that would prepare leaders on your team, principals, future administrators, what are the 3 core pillars that you would have in that program? Like, what are the things that they really need to work on?
One, data. This is all one pillar, right? Not 3 different ones, but one pillar would be data analytics and artificial intelligence, right? Ensuring that there's enough data, right, to be able to build specific models or to concatenate in a relationship or a relational and structured manner. The analytics aspect of it to really get to the equity focus of what type of change you want to make in the organization. And then artificial intelligence, you have to scale it. I think that we unlocked the potential that artificial intelligence can bring in education, specifically around algorithms, machine learning, platforms, and thus just digital and technological infrastructure scaling. That's one pillar. I think 2 is this dynamic of being agile, expect pitfalls, identify what those triggers are, and ensuring that you have the leadership capability to identify those checks and be agile and be willing to experiment at a high level. And then I think the 3rd is obviously grounded leadership around teaching, learning, and equity. Those are the 3 kind of pillars, and there would have to be some level of reciprocity with them, and they would have to be robust, right? Yeah. Because right now, those are the 3 critical elements that I think are important in this pandemic world that we're living in, but also in the post-pandemic as well. But expanding on the learning from the pandemic environment.
Awesome. And just to wrap up this conversation, if you have a vision for what districts might look like in a few sentences in 10 years from now, like what is that kind of vision or North Star that you might have for districts? Because it shouldn't look the way it was. I mean, all the learnings have to be embedded in what we design for the future.
Absolutely, Anthony. There should be a strategic elimination of the Carnegie unit. Students, we shouldn't have to measure success by seat time. Traditional age-graded classrooms are gone. There's no designation of a first grader or second grader by the age of 6 or 7. There's a level of equity among students where teachers are facilitating learning based on a cluster of standards, and they're using data to differentiate in these classrooms. Artificial intelligence and technology will be a part of Tier 1, and there'll be a high level of flexibility and augmentation within academic schedules and time. There'll be more affinity groups with leaders across the country where now I can talk to an Anthony Kim from San Francisco right now and Michael Connor in Connecticut, as opposed to traditional mechanisms of learning. Right. And I think that there would be more of a community participation and parents through crowdsourcing, where the wisdom comes from the crowd, not just leaders. And there's innovation hubs for students where learning is on demand. There's just a lot of things. I know I'm going very, very long with this vision, but this is radically different because I look at this, Anthony, from we're educating Generation Alpha and Generation Z. Generation Alpha is pretty much Generation AI. They were born with a phone and an iPad in their hand. We can't have the same traditional industrial structures for them in school where our kids are going to get bored and equity gaps are going to grow. So when I think about this, having artificial intelligence, having, technological devices and digital, enhancing the digital environment in schools and teachers, working in collaboration or synonymously with AI. I think that will be in alignment to meet the economic demand as opposed to just perpetuating the supply of education.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I would want to be at that school too. So I appreciate you sharing all of that.
Design a school for a district for my son. So, but yeah,
exactly.
Anthony, thank you. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation I had with Mike Connor. I definitely need Mike's help in understanding AI and machine learning. That's something I just don't have any clue about, but I know that it's going to be something that's essential because there's just so much technology and so much data around us, and it's going to be something that we just need to get more aware of and make part of our daily decision making, just understanding all of this data around us. So thank you, Mike, for just opening my eyes to the ways we should think about innovation, data, AI, machine learning in the future. But also, I really liked some of the points that you made around the future of schools, and this is something that I do know a bit about. And so, yes, I agree that we shouldn't have Carnegie units. We shouldn't have age-based classrooms. We should have more fluid and learning-focused classrooms, not structured based off of grades or seat time. So thank you for bringing those things up too. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and look out for the next one. Peace.